Hi, I'm Dr. Winifred Frick, and I'm the chief scientist at Bat Conservation International. We're a nonprofit that exists to safeguard bats for the benefit of nature and people. So we work all around the world addressing the urgent threats to bats and making sure that we're protecting them and the habitats they rely on. Absolutely. So, first of all, people are always surprised to hear just how diverse bats are. We now know there are over 1,500 different species of bats, and we discover new species every year. So, bats are found on every continent except for Antarctica. So, they're just incredibly diverse in the kinds of things that they do. But some of the notable ecosystem services that bats provide include that most bats are insectivorous, so they're eating lots of insects out of the night sky, and many of those insects turn out to be crop pests. So bats are helping our farmers, whether that's corn, rice, coffee, cacao, by eating crop pests and reducing the need to put pesticides on our food. And then in tropical areas, there's a lot of fruit-eating bats and nectar slurping bats. And so fruit-eating bats are really important in tropical forests because they'll eat fruits and they'll carry them through the forest and they'll drop them, and that helps seedlings sprout and forests regenerate. And then nectar-feeding bats are really important for pollination. So the pollen gets stuck on their fur and they move it from plant to plant, and then the plants can pollinate and reproduce. Well, bats are under serious threat. So I think we're all familiar with the biodiversity crisis. We know that the Earth is in crisis right now from both climate change and from the stressors to biodiversity, and bats are no exception. So the most urgent threats to bats include, habitat destruction and degradation due to the chopping down of the rainforest and other ways in which we're disrupting natural habitats. Bats are also at risk from climate change of, severe storms and extreme weather. Can harm bats. There's these big heat waves in Australia that have killed some of the flying foxes that live there. But also other threats include novel disease. So worked quite a bit on a disease called white nose syndrome that's killed millions of bats here in North America. And then one of the things I think we'll talk about today is that it's really important that we work on a transition to clean energy, but we also need to make sure that renewable energy like wind turbines doesn't also add to some of the mortality stress that our bats face. And unfortunately, wind turbines do kill a lot of bats. So we need to make sure that we're operating our wind farms in ways that can produce clean energy, but doesn't cause unnecessary harm to our bat populations. Well, we're really concerned about a few species. So we know that globally, that wind farms around the world, especially as we're expanding wind energy facilities, the number of bats being killed every year around the world is in the millions. So that's really concerning. Here in North America, one of the species that we've studied the most is the hoary bat, which is this beautiful species that actually does long-range migrations. They have this beautiful thick fur because they like to hang. Most of us think of bats always roosting in caves, but the hoary bats are really cool because they actually hang up in the branches of trees. So they have really thick fur, and they'll actually use their tail membrane as like a little blanket for themselves. And that's just like a little fun fact about hoary bats. But for some reason, that species is really susceptible to being killed by wind turbines. So it accounts for a lot of the dead bats we find underneath wind turbines when people go out and look for the carcasses of bats killed by the spinning blades. So the great thing is that we know how to reduce the number of bats being killed because scientists have been studying this now for a couple decades. Some of the really early foundational work to do some experimental tests and see, could we operate wind turbines differently and reduce the number of bats being killed, turned out that we can. And so the secret really is, or not, it's not a secret, the solution is that bats are more susceptible to being killed by wind turbines on low wind speed nights during their autumnal, their fall migration period. So if we change when we allow the turbine blades to spin to being that you have to wait till during the nocturnal hours, because bats are all nocturnal, if we wait for the wind speeds where you allow the blades to start spinning to generate electricity, if you change that to being higher, to like at least 5 meters per second or up to 6.5 meters per second, then you can reduce like 50% of the bats you might kill at a facility. And you only have to do that. So in places like North America, you only have to do that, during the fall when bats are migrating, and at night. So, and it's the low wind speed nights. So this is at times in which the turbines aren't generating a lot of electricity. Now, as we think about operating wind turbines in other parts of the world where there's maybe less of a precise seasonal migration of bats, we need to do a little bit of work to figure out when are the high risk periods and how best to change those operation conditions. So we call that curtailment. Curtailing the turbines is when you just basically say, don't let the blades spin during this period of time that you would otherwise let them spin to generate energy. Oh, well, bats are so fascinating. I mean, they're such an incredible group of organisms that are so diverse and interesting, and sort of, not your like standard poster child of a mammal, right? And so I remember very clearly the first bat that I really got to observe. I was actually in Kenya on a school for field studies, study abroad when I was in college. And there was a bat, it's still one of my favorite bats, the African yellow-winged bat, Lavia frons. And they like to also hang out in the open in the acacia trees, and they're just an incredible looking animal, just being very fascinated. And then I had the opportunity to get to volunteer and work with somebody who was studying bats and decided that that's what I wanted to do, and ended up getting my PhD working on bats down on the Baja California in Mexico. And it's just deeply committed to making sure that we're finding ways to protect these incredible animals all around the world.